Breaking tonight is the Russia probe becoming a problem now for Democrats. Investigations have a way of migrating, and the Clintons know that well from prior experience. Today, two brand new investigations were launched on the Hill as new information has come to light that raises questions about Russian influence during the Obama administration with this Uranium One sale, and also the FBI and Hillary Clinton's emails. Tonight, two of the top lawmakers behind these investigations join us on the story. We'll be hearing from Senator Chuck Grassley in just a moment, but we begin with House Oversight Committee Chairman, South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy. Congressman, good evening. Great to have you here, as always. So let me start with the FBI and the email investigation. What is new there that causes a new look at this?
I think the most recent new thing is the allegation that Director Comey or the Bureau may have made up their mind in May of 2016, whereas they announced their decision in July. So they interviewed 24 witnesses after they had already made up their minds. That's the allegation. But Martha, it's more than that. There were Democrats that were really unhappy with the Department of Justice last fall. There were Republicans that were unhappy earlier in the year. And that's the one entity that everyone has to have confidence in. Even if you disagree with the decisions that are reached, you have to understand those decisions and you have to have confidence that they were apolitical. So Chairman Gillette and I came up with really 6 questions that we think are pretty evenly divided in terms of what Democrats want to know and what Republicans, and the Department of Justice is not above scrutiny, and they're not above review. I have great respect for them, but they're not above scrutiny. In 2016, in my opinion, left a lot of unanswered questions for the department.
Yeah, I know one of those is why the Hillary Clinton investigation was discussed and the Trump investigation in terms of the possibility of Russian collusion was not discussed. But in terms of what you just mentioned and the political aspect of this, is there any evidence that Loretta Lynch made a phone call, that she asked anyone before she took that meeting with Bill Clinton on the tarmac?
If there's evidence of that, Martha, I haven't seen it, and it has not been brought to my attention. But you put your finger on exactly why you need to have investigations. You need to come up with a list of witnesses, and of course she's on that witness list, and then you need to access the documents. Again, you and I are having this conversation because someone sought to access documents from the Department of Justice. So you do all of that, and then you do your interviews, transcribed interviews, which is my preferred way of doing it. And whatever you learn, you share in a public forum. But you don't start with public hearings. You end with public hearings. You have to do the hard work of investigating before you get to that point.
And in terms of that, do you expect that you will have access to anyone at the FBI who may have been privy to the writing of the Jim Comey draft when he started to put that together 2 months before reaching his conclusion about Hillary Clinton?
Well, that's a really good question, and that's going to be up to the Department of Justice. And so far, in some instances, we have gotten no better cooperation from the current Department of Justice than we did their predecessor. So that remains to be seen, whether or not the Department of Justice is cooperative. I would remind them of this. Congress created them, Congress funds them, and no entity is above oversight. I get oversight done on me every 2 years for sure, and more frequently than that, the Department of Justice is not above having to explain the decisions they reach or do not reach. And it doesn't have to be adversarial. But so far, it's been really difficult to get information from this Department of Justice, and I would recommend that they change that posture.
That's interesting. Here's Hillary Clinton and her reaction to the reopening of these two investigations.
I would say it's the same baloney they've been peddling for years, and there's been no credible evidence by anyone. In fact, it's been debunked repeatedly and will continue to be debunked.
She and others, other Democrats on the Hill, Representatives Cummings and Representative Conyers, are both suggesting that this is just, haze being thrown at the Russia investigation in an effort to distract from the Trump investigation.
Well, I would tell Secretary Clinton and Mr. Conyers and Mr. Cummings, Republicans don't get to write the headlines. We don't get to decide what the media covers and what they don't cover. God knows they've been covering Russia since January. I spent all day in a skiff interviewing witnesses related to the Russia investigation. So I don't know where Mr. Conyers or Mr. Cummings or Secretary Clinton were today, but I know where I was, which is investigating allegations of collusion. So I'm at peace with what I'm doing, but Congress is actually capable of of doing more than one investigation at a time. And there was a time when Democrats did not think Jim Comey was the second coming of Christ. Remember, last fall, Harry Reid wanted him prosecuted for a Hatch Act violation.
Sure do. Yeah,
so
it has cut both ways.
I don't know where this...
I got to go, but before I go, have you found any evidence of collusion on the Trump-Russia collusion investigation?
Well, I'm going to be really careful not to do what I think the Department of Justice did, which is draw a conclusion before the end of the investigation. It's still ongoing. To date, there has not been a single witness who has provided a single piece of evidence supporting collusion, coordination, or conspiracy, but we are not through with the investigation.
Well, that opens up a lot of questions about the dossier, which we will save for another day,
Yes,
and another interesting conversation with you as always. Congressman Trey Gowdy, thank you so much, sir. Good to see you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So my next guest has been
Service agent, former NYPD officer, and author of Renegade Republican. You also have another book out, right?
Yeah, well, Renegade Republican is my podcast, but Protecting the President is my book. Thanks for...
Right, it's still out right now.
Still out right now.
And you're going to be on Outnumbered a little bit later.
A little bit, yes. I will be the lucky guy.
I like your socks.
You know, I stole the idea from Pete Hegseth. I'm not kidding. Like, I used to wear black socks, and I saw Pete. I said, I'm definitely going to spice it up a bit.
Well, take a
I
look
even
at
put a
this.
tie on for you guys.
They look
See?
nice.
I put a tie on today, which I never do.
Let's see yours.
I want plain
Straight black.
Yeah. But here's the thing. If you start wearing gel, then I'm going to get worried, because then you're being too much Hegseth.
Oh, yeah, no, I keep my hair short.
All right, let's talk to you about what's happening with the Russian collusion, because, you know, the Democrats are saying against President Trump, Russia, Russia, Russia.
Yeah.
They're saying that meeting with Don Jr., that was treason with the Russian attorney.
Right.
But now we're hearing all of this about the Democrats and Hillary Clinton and Fusion GPS, and they're saying, oh, that's just standard. That's what both sides always do.
Yeah, listen, I really try not to jump on the conspiracy theory train ever, even on my own show. Like, I get in trouble sometimes for not feeding into conspiracy theories. But how is this not the scandal of the century right now? We have the Democrats for 6 months, even more than that, who pumped us. I mean, if you're a liberal today, don't you feel stupid that for 6 months you were told the biggest scandal in the world was Trump colluding with the Russians to tilt the course of an American election? Now we find out that the boomerang has come back and slammed the Democrats right in the face, and the entire time the Russian connection was through the DNC and the Clinton campaign. Hey, there's a couple of takeaways from this, though. Think about this. I was a former federal investigator. This is not a joke now. You had bogus, spurious information, potentially fed from the Russians, into our FBI that was used in a presidential daily brief. The president was briefed on fake Russian information.
Under the supervision of the National Intelligence Director, James Clapper, while briefed by the FBI Director, James Comey. I think you should be aware of this. There might be some leverage used against you once you assume office.
And I'll take this to the second point here, too. You're right. If this information was used, God forbid, in a judicial document to get a warrant to tap anyone or on the Trump campaign, I mean, you want to hear about a scandal? The FBI used fake Russian intel potentially?
Dan, I read in the New York Post this morning, this dossier was used to apparently to justify a FISA warrant to spy, monitor the government. Monitors, not spies, on some members of the Trump campaign. So it's exactly what you were talking about.
And
it was paid for by the opponent, which is crazy.
I mean, this is just. I saw your guest earlier, the Magnitsky lawyer. This
Bill
is.
Browder.
Oh my gosh! I mean, how is this information? If you're a liberal, how are you not horrified? I get it. Listen, I don't tell anybody who to vote for anymore. Do what you want. Vote Democrat, vote Republican. That's fine. But if you're a liberal today who bought into this, how are you not horrified that people in your government at the spheres of power took fake Russian intel to start a counterintelligence investigation against the presidential candidate?
This should be illegal. It should not happen. What happens next?
I think Fusion GPS, right now, this has become a very serious investigation.
You mean the group that took the fifth?
Yeah, they took the fifth. Fusion GPS has got to come clean. We have to see the bank records. And in those bank records, you have to look for one thing. And Catherine Herridge has been all over this. Yeah. Did the Russians pay Fusion GPS, and what was the money for? Because this, folks, I'm telling you, we all have lost trust in our entire IC intelligence community.
Can you imagine we agree that the DNC did write $3.6 million, and the Hillary Clinton campaign over $5 million, just short of $6 million. So you're trying to see if the Russians were also paying.
If the Russians were paying the conduit, the vehicle for this whole thing, Fusion GPS, while the DNC and Hillary were, and what were they taking that money for? Yeah, I mean, you have a monstrous scandal that really could change American politics forever.
Man, oh man. Meanwhile, let's talk a little bit about the terrible story earlier this month, that is to say, in Las Vegas, where Jesus Cruz Campos apparently walked in to the 32nd floor. He was a security guard at Mandalay Bay and wound up getting shot in the leg.
Yeah.
Now it is, and people were
hailed as a hero.
Where did he go between that night and his appearance on Ellen?
Yeah.
As it turns out now, Tucker had on his show last night somebody who suggested that he left the country, went to Mexico for a week.
Yeah.
And we didn't even know about it.
Yeah, that's really strange. Listen, I get it. He was a victim in this. I totally understand. But this is the largest potential crime. This is a crime of the century. I mean, in American history, we had a huge mass murder, a horrific attack. The American people understandably want answers, and this investigation has not been very forthcoming. The most innocent explanation I can imagine in this at this point, because it is very strange, is it may have been a pre-planned trip, but he was a witness to one of the largest murders in American history. By the way, with a wounded leg. He was shot with a .556 or .223 round.
Why would this be alarming, though? Why would that be strange? You went to Mexico.
Well, because you're the witness of the biggest crime in American history while investigators are potentially going to need access to you, and you leave the country. It's just off while you're injured, by the way.
Why would we let him leave the country?
As it appears right now, he appears to be the hero on this. At the very least, he could reconstruct the timeline.
Well, my innocent explanation, because I want to defer to them on this and believe that this is the right thing here, is that Mandalay understood that he was overwhelmed with the attention, understandably. I mean, he was involved. He was a victim of this as well, and that they needed to give him some time to get his thoughts together before he said something on an interview that could potentially cause legal liability.
He did come back,
go to
right?
Ellen?
He did come back.
And you're worried you go to Ellen?
Well,
come on, that's ridiculous.
But that's the only.
She didn't even ask what the timeline was.
But think about it, Brian. That's the only one they could control because of business relationships there. There were other interviews they couldn't control, and I'm afraid they thought he was going to say something that would put some legal liability on Mandalay.
I take a stand. Ellen cannot be controlled.
She dances pretty well.
She's a very good dancer.
Do you dance?
And not as well as you would think.
You ever seen Brian dance on the set?
I never have. No.
Right. I'm a happy non-dancer.
I've seen him dance once.
Right.
It was the YMCA.
Right. It's not really a
long
dance.
story. Dan, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
We'll see
Someone
you
on our staff is getting married in December, so I expect you to see him on the dance floor.
Yeah,
I want
who is
video.
that, by the way? That's AJ, right?
AJ, yeah.
Right.
Remember, you saw him. He proposed to his fiancée in Times Square on the video.
Producers.
Right.
Dance floor.
December 1st is the date of the nuptials.
Yes.